And I'm excited that it's becoming more that, healing for men is more normalized. And I don't know that we're going at a quick enough pace to sort of get us out of the, like if we're going to move into a better world, I think that men are going to be the ones that lead us into that place, or at least, play a large role in that. And I am nervously optimistic that we can pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I can say on that. I agree with you. I think, I don't know if have you read like the Robert Bly stuff, like Iron John? That's like kind of a classic men's work
No, I've
book.
not. I've not read that one. No, I'll have
Check it
to
out.
add to the
But one
list.
thing he talks about in that is like there's this phase in masculinity called the ashes, where you're just like kind of burnt and you're like smoldering and you're just like, next to this fire and you're just in this like place of shame and inward looking and you're very, very weak, right? And I think that's where a lot of men are. And
Mm.
that's critical for growth, right? If you think the phoenix metaphor, right? You got to burn all the way down before you can be reborn. And I think there's those bully men out there, right? Those more traditional masculine or toxic masculine dudes that are still, in many ways, like winning, right? And speaking to younger boys. And the ones of us that are healing, I think as a group, we're still in that ashes phase where we're healing, but we're not yet powerful enough. And I'm hopeful in the next 20 years. I think Gen Z is awesome. I think the millennials were doing some good work too. But I think like in the next 20 years, maybe we can arise from that and actually challenge, like directly challenge these dudes, and when we talk about, the topic I was chatting about, how therapy fails men, it's like, I think a lot of men that go to this work, they get feminized, whereas what we need is to have more stronger men, right? And not stronger in the terms of being a bully or how much can you bench or how much can you squat, although health is important. It's about like being an ethical man, right? Being a truly ethical man that's able to sacrifice for the greater good and has the power to stand up for those that need it the most, right? Like I think we've lost that. We've lost that ability to pick up the sword for good, not just for personal gain.
Yeah, one of my favorite sort of tropes, maybe, and that's not the right word, but ideas is that, I'd rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in war. And it's that idea of, the meek shall inherit the earth. And I remember growing up, I went to Catholic school and I've talked a lot about my 16 years of Catholic school experience on this show. But I remember just coming away going, oh, that's interesting, because my interpretation of meek was like wimpy. It was like, oh, okay. That's a weird thing. But also that misconception was not corrected. It was actually like kind of perpetuated by the structures at B, because that sort of makes sense. Like, you want kids to stay in line. There was sort of this compliance thing that was very much a part of it. And as I sort of grew and came into my own and learned that no, meek is not like wimpy. Meek means like someone who is strong, has the ability to discern when to pick up the sword and when to not.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I don't even if like, years ago, it was like, even if I wanted to defend myself, or even if I wanted to be, this warrior, like I haven't even developed that in myself. I've ignored and avoided that so much. And part of it is because, growing up in the 90s, and I grew up in LA, where it was an interesting sort of just environment, but violence was detested. It was like, if you got into one fight in school, you were going to be a loser and you were going to spend the rest of your life in jail. And so it was like, all right, let me learn how to be conflict averse. Let me pacify everything at the expense of my own boundaries and the expense of my own worth and the expense of my own everything, because I'm so scared of conflict, violence, and it's not, war and all that. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we have to be like these authoritarians. What I am saying is that if a guy is not confident in his ability to defend himself or to stand his ground or to own his space, or in whatever sort of capacity that is, like, that creates some huge downstream effects that prevent that guy from doing blank, right? Being fulfilled, being happy. Like, it spills out in so many different areas that I didn't realize. And, it took me till I was, 30 to sort of realize and wake up to that, when I go like, oh, if someone needs to protect my family, like, it's got to be me. Like I said, like I am now the protector, and I'm grateful that I had that awakening. But I think that not enough guys sort of see that distinction, or they sort of have that misconception of what meek means.
Yeah. And we were talking about it was similar for my story too. I think a lot of millennial men, right? I was born in the 90s. Like, this is their story. I'll go through it quickly, right? I mean, you have the toxic masculine generation, right? The boomers, where they looked at women, right? And they said, I'm not that, right? Like, I don't know what I am, but I'm not that. And that's very fragile. right? Because it's not a internally motivated sense of identity. It's like an anti-identity, right? Saying, I'm not going to be weak. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to be emotional, right? All the stuff that I'm sure you talked about ad nauseum on the show, right? But then our generation, we looked at the men and we said, I don't know what I am, but I'm not that, right? And especially for our generation, we're the generation of divorce. I don't know if you're raised in a divorced family or not, but many of us were. So a lot of us were raised by single mothers that were, demonizing the father, right, that left or that whatever the conflict was. So we looked at them and we're like, I'm not that. I'm not going to be domineering. I'm not going to be aggressive. I'm not going to be greedy. I'm not going to be selfish, right? All these things that we were taught. And then we got this generation of dudes who we are actually really emotionally intelligent and we actually get along pretty well with women and we can talk about our feelings, but we're nice guys, right? Another great book, Dr. Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy, right? We're nice guys. We have this thing where our generation needs to kind of learn from the traditional masculine, right? We need to seek challenge because our life is pretty easy for us. The 90s was a golden age for America, right? Like money was great. Everyone was safe. Like it was a wonderful time, especially to be like a white man, right? So like, it's like that level was incredible. We were born in with such luxury that we need to bring in challenge, right? And I think for a lot of guys, it starts with physicality, right? Working out, getting healthy, getting your diet and exercise under control. It's a very classical way to do it. And then it becomes this emotional challenge that you and I are talking about now. But I think as men, we need to bring that in, or else we do become this kind of like too soft, too noodly, too wiggly version, right? That's what I was saying before, that kind of overly feminized version. We need to figure out what it means to be men without being assholes, right? Like without
Right.
dominating, right? Being that benevolent king, right? Being the person that cares about their family, that can protect their family, that is setting up all these things, that I talked about, those vaccine things that are preventing tragedy from striking, but still keeping our sensitivity and our open heart. I think that's the challenge of the millennial man. But I think many of us have collapsed. I think many of us have become this kind of like forever child in a way, right? Where they're still, drinking, drugging, gaming, right? There's a lot of millennials that don't quite grow up. We don't become those adults. We're still living in nostalgia because we need that fire. And I think we need a little sharpness in our lives as a generation.